It was really very fortunate for me to attend this ceremony early in the morning. Today, I'm going to talk about my real life experience using telemedicine to treat and to manage COVID-19 patients. It's quite very strange for me. I practiced ordinary medicine, traditional medicine for more than 15 years. And due to COVID-19, I've changed my usual practice because of, this isolation. And so I want to figure out some of the prospective future aspect of this telemedicine approach. So let's see. On January 2020, the world has been awake on an epidemic that soon transformed into a pandemic. All of us currently know as COVID-19. At the time, I was alone working as a visiting professor in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia after my family has traveled back to Egypt for a short vacation. Suddenly, the international air travel was locked and I became isolated alone in my home, away from my family, from my little daughters, and from my elder parents, with no possible way for them to come or for me to go to them. I had nothing but an anxiety, fear, and research, seeing the news that is spreading all over the world. Wishing to help my isolated family back in Egypt, including my elder parent, as I've said, and two young daughters, 4 and 2 years old, my COVID-19 research evolved fast as I have never been able to, and fruited a first of its kind pioneering article to repurpose 2 inexpensive FDA-approved drugs, claiming a survival benefit if taken early during COVID-19 due to restoration of interferon balance. At that time, there was no research about the role of interferon, the role of these drugs, if taken together to manage COVID-19, and these drugs were nitazoxanide and azithromycin. At first, it was preprinted at a famous preprint server, and soon it became published in a Q1 journal, which is pharmacological research. And after that, it was cited by dozens of other researchers and publications. However, I was also very anxious about the claim that non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs might be hazardous for COVID-19. This claim came when a correspondence appeared in the Lancet Respiratory Medicine. You can see the title, "Our patient with hypertension, diabetes, are increased risk of COVID-19 infection," and the authors, unfortunately, anticipated that ibuprofen and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs might be hazardous if they are taken for COVID-19. I have examined this correspondence and I was amazed. This is my specialty. I'm a physician as well as a pharmacologist. So when I examined their proofs, I found nothing. I even called it a scam. This is unusual for me, but because I've seen the world all over, the countries are avoiding non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug because of this correspondence, I tried just 1 or 2 weeks later to send to New England Journal of Medicine, as well as dozens of other journals, that their claims are not true at all. I even in this, transcript called it a real scam. And of course, I found rejections. They can never accept a scientist from the Middle East or from Africa to say a scam about those notable researchers. Dozens of rejections were encountered. I counted about 12 rejections from reputable journals, and not a single honorable peer review was sent. It was just, we cannot publish it. However, I was fortunate to have advice to lower my tone of criticism. And almost 6 months later, it has been appeared after being peer reviewed, and it was published in a reputable international journal. And I called it not a scam, I called it the other side of the mirror. I truly actually have not changed a word from the science, but I lowered my tone of criticism. Actually, I was claiming since the early beginning of COVID-19 that this hyperinflammatory disease should be better managed by the anti-inflammatory drug. So from the first start, I said that non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs have survival benefit, have beneficial benefit when taken over the paracetamol, which lack a lot of potent anti-inflammatory drugs. And soon I had another paper peer-reviewed and published in a Q1 journal, also Biomedicine and Pharmacology, saying why I believe that early use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug will actually save lives, prevent complication, and improve the clinical outcomes when taken early in COVID-19. And this was another published article after also several rejection unexplained without peer review. But as you see, the world has still honorable editors, honorable people that will not refuse to send an article for being peer reviewed. Actually, they are few. The vast majority, perhaps because I'm African, I'm Egyptian, I don't know, but the vast majority of the journal will not send it to peer review. And when it is sent, I found I can reply to the editors and it actually will be published. Later, other preprints have explored other mechanisms to reason for the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug potential COVID-19 life-saving. Here is one currently under review at expert review of infective therapy. This is a reputable journal also. And here is another preprint also under consideration at another reputable journal. And at this time, my anger and passion was reflected through my social media account. Surprisingly, I began to receive compassionate requests to help from my fellow Egyptian people, whether in Egypt or in Saudi Arabia. At the time, if you remember 1 year ago, the mortality rate was very high. We had no treatment. And meanwhile, I also have published some papers criticizing some of the drugs that were being administered at this time, including hydroxychloroquine promoted by President Trump. I don't know why, including remdesivir, which is still, and actually I have a paper recently published saying that remdesivir is really potentially fatal drug. And that's why I found many compassionate requests to help. And for the first time of my life, I changed to telemedicine and adopted as a practice and evolved my experience using these techniques new to me, one who has also only used the traditional techniques of inspection, palpation, percussion, and auscultation. Now I'm counting only my clinical sense and my social media video and my experience while asking and taking the history from the patients. And here is a YouTube video published on May 2020 saying that COVID-19 safe treatment protocol is being ignored because of Trump and Dr. Anthony Fauci bias and politics. I was not afraid to say my opinion boldly and clearly because I believe and still believing lives are on the stake and I should not be afraid to say what I think is true. Then, for those patients, I've used non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, nitazoxanide, and azithromycin. And meanwhile, I evolved this immunomodulatory protocol, as I named it later, to safely manage dozens of COVID-19 consented patient and legal guardian, including and presented 45 telemedicines. The most recent update of this preprint include my experience with 45 telemedicine consented cases, which is highly documented. It was first reprinted on June 2020 and described it as breakthrough. Since then, I have received the usual unexplained denial of review from dozens of journals. Once it was sent for peer reviewer, by the way, by a reputable journal, and it was accepted. This breakthrough, it was accepted on November 2020. Yet, unfortunately, it was withdrawn from publication in unprecedented act that I don't know exactly why are the reason for this action, because it is unexplainable from my point of view. And here is a proof post-acceptance agreement, and they withdraw it from publishing. I don't know why. Some unexplainable excuses that I just ignore. Those 45 patients included children, adults, geriatric, pregnant, lactating, and immunocompromised patients. And it is all written in this preprint that has been once accepted after being peer reviewed. Some patients were categorized as moderate to severe COVID-19, it is also described, and many patients had multiple comorbidities. The patients included 12 confirmed by PCR, the others were highly suspected by laboratory, radiological, as well as the history and clinical picture, and had no way to access for the PCR. As you know, in Egypt, as well as some developing countries, it is not easy at all to perform PCR. The success rate, as it appeared, was 100%. No serious adverse effects were reported. And I called it an observational study. For 1 year, I'm asking for large clinical trials to be adopted, but in vain. I do suggest that telemedicine can be a very valuable tool, as it has been in this pandemic. You know, there is a wonderful review article coming from India, and you are doing a wonderful job. I can see and counter multiple papers coming from Indian researchers, and they are just presenting some novel and elegant medical approach. And here is one of these reviews. And here is another review coming from USA also about telemedicine use. In both reviews, you will find that telemedicine is currently being adopted and used successfully all over the world, and it has a lot of benefits, a lot of potentials that can be built upon and that should be built upon. And in my point of view, in management of infectious diseases in particular, telemedicine might have a crucial role as an alternative, more practical method to help patients, especially in developing countries where private practice is the dominant one. By the way, my presented 45 cases as well as other cases were managed for free. Yet, when I resume my private clinical medical practice, telemedicine, and adopt this telemedicine approach, it will cost, as we have taxes, rent, and salaries to pay. I wonder if one day, probably soon, big institutions might think of virtual hospitals and healthcare facilities where different clinics, specialties, use telemedicine to provide a proper medical advice and management. Moreover, after remote telemedicine, robotic surgery has evolved. A branch of these virtual hospitals might have a ward on the actual ground, where after evaluation by telemedicine, the patient would go there and have their robotic surgery performed remotely by their consulting surgeons. COVID-19 not only changed our world, it has also and more profoundly changed our minds and medical practice. Many disciplines, including telemedicine, were underestimated, and they are currently in huge progress and evolution. I suggest a prospective evaluation should begin soonest to prepare for the next normal steps for the best interest of the medical practice. Finally, I still believe that the editors of the Lancet Respiratory Medicine who have authorized the release of that catastrophic correspondence and refused repeatedly, together with those on the mother Lancet journal, refused to publish the reply promptly, should be penalized because they affected the lives of patients all over the world, as I do believe. And I think the claimless scams that prohibited for long non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug to manage the inflammatory COVID-19 should be put under investigation. One day, we might witness them and other editors and authors to be judged properly, hopefully in this life, not in the other one. Here is one of the papers recently published. I thought it will never see the light because I'm criticizing remdesivir, favipiravir, and I'm saying that dexamethasone have questions that should be answered. And I'm saying clearly that dexamethasone use in the developing countries is wasting lives because it is malpracticed. Not all countries like India. A lot of developing countries, people heard about the dexamethasone is like a magic. So they give it to mild and moderate COVID-19 patients, and we saw mortalities and fatalities because of this malpractice. And even in this severe COVID-19, dexamethasone have rules to be done and to be administered, and you might also examine this peer-reviewed published article that had no response till now, as well as all my articles. And here is another preprint that I think also will not see the light, because every time I send it to Nature, Science, and even not reputable journal like this, they are afraid to publish it, because I'm just saying that SARS-CoV-2 vaccines have some hazard and we should know it, then decide. I'm just saying that we should know it and decide. These hazards include autoimmunity from my point of view, and some also a phenomena called antibody-dependent enhancement. And unfortunately, this paper is also seeing the much ignorance and purposeful neglect as other articles. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mira. Actually, I absolutely agree with you that in spite of 1 year experience, we have not been able to standardize the treatment protocol. There is a vast variation the way our physicians are looking at in the different hospitals. And this is really an area of concern. Other thing is that data which could have been generated from the patient in the big countries like India, Indonesia, USA, actually has been missed out. Partly, of course, Lancet or BMJ have done some work, but we could have done much more. I think really very practical presentation you had made. I really admire your work which you have presented. Very useful for the participant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It was
Now, next on the list is Dr. Rafiq Islam from the Japan. Rafiq Islam, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please come in. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Dr. Mira, can you remove the presentation? So, Dr. Rafiq.
Actually, I think I will get out and rejoin right now because I don't know how to end it.